I'm Nick Bruliette with Company Cam. Thanks for attending today, and I am joined by Sebastian and Dominic, and I will go ahead and hand it off to them. They're the ones you're here to listen to, so I'll let them introduce themselves a little bit more and take the floor.
You go first, Sebastian.
Amazing. Thank you. Appreciate it. So hi guys, I'm Sebastian. Many of you know me already since I see a lot of our customers here. Thank you guys for coming today. I'm the founder and CEO of Rillavoice. For those of you who don't know, Rilla is the leading speech analytics software for the home improvement industry. What that means is when salespeople go out and talk to homeowners in the home, they will be recording their conversations with their phones or tablets through our mobile app. And then we are using AI to automatically transcribe, analyze, and give salespeople feedback on what they can do to improve their conversations and ultimately their sales, and to help world-class sales coaches like many of you here today, and like our friend Dom here, coach people remotely doing what we call virtual ride-alongs that are 100 times faster, better, and cheaper. Super excited to be here to share some of the insights that we found, and super excited to share the stage with Dom. Always a pleasure, man.
Awesome. Thank you, Sebastian. And it's an honor to be with both of you, Nick and Sebastian. And thanks for considering Grosso University. So again, those of you that don't know, I am Dominic Caminata, owner and founder of Grosso University. And I always say one of my affirmations, I am the industry leading sales trainer. So I'll just keep telling myself that every day. Eventually it's going to come true. The reason why this webinar is near and dear to my heart and why I'm so excited to have this conversation is because I can sincerely say, and not to put, Sebastian's technology too high up on a pedestal. I actually have this program at Grosso University we founded called the Sales Academy. And what this is we actually are the official training arm for about 30 companies coast to coast, where they don't even have their own sales trainer. We actually train, onboard, test, and certify their sales team for them and place them back into their company with a performance guarantee. Now, imagine that you're training people all over the country. They're going through your 2-week onboarding. They test out the final exam. Then you send them out to the wild, and you have no clue what the hell happens after that point. You have no visibility. There's no rhyme or reason after the fact in terms of the post-training molding and support. You're doing everything reactively. So one thing I knew that was going to be a foundational element to make the Sales Academy even possible was if we had some sort of virtual ride-along technology where a sales rep could record the conversation and somehow we could score and grade that conversation so we can make sure they're going in the right direction. I call that lane assist. You want to make sure you're continuing to steer the sales rep in the right direction, keep them on track. So literally the Sales Academy is made possible by Rillavoice, and I can say that 100% sincerely. And I got some amazing case studies we can share, how we literally from the comfort of our own home, we're literally having better results, training people virtually and remotely using tools like Zoom and Rillavoice than a company that has a full-time glorified sales trainer that's in the trenches physically with them full-time. And the results are absolutely astounding. And again, we're going to dive more into what those look like. But I just want to thank Sebastian. Again, thank you, Nick. But literally without Rillavoice, we wouldn't be able to have a program like this. It's absolutely mind-blowing what we can do.
Thank you, man. We love working with Tom. So yes.
I'm gonna hop in real quick. So I thought the chat was up. It's not. Q&A, stick to the Q&As. If you have questions throughout the entire presentation, feel free to throw something in there. I'll be monitoring that, and I will relay those over to the guys as we go. So, all right, take it away.
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, guys, for a little bit so that we can introduce the topic that we're going to be talking about today. So can you guys see my screen there?
Yes, we can.
Amazing. So the topic that we want to talk about today, the webinar is titled Moneyball for Sales, how we analyze 500,000 sales conversations to understand what is it that the top performers of across the country, across industries, what is it that they're doing differently to actually close more deals than anybody else, right? And we call that Moneyball for Sales. For those of you who haven't seen this movie with Brad Pitt, the movie's based on a book called Moneyball. And the movie tells the story of this guy, Billy Beane, who was the manager of the Oakland A's. And back in the early 2000s, Billy Beane, he was really kind of, annoyed at the fact that the Oakland A's never won anything. And they just kept losing. And they kept losing because, they didn't have the money to buy the top talent. And they couldn't, figure out how to beat the best teams who had more money. And Billy Bean, he came in and said, listen, we need to play the game of baseball differently. We cannot keep playing just expecting that we're going to get the best talent because we don't have the most amount of money. So he said, listen, let's change the framework here. Let's play baseball not as a game of talent, but as a game of numbers. And what he did was he hired a team of data scientists, really, really smart people who graduated from some of the top colleges. And he said, let's look at, we know what results in good games because you win, and it's, you have output, how many home runs you hit, how many hits you hit in the game, how many like how much do you score, how much do you score per player, the RBI of every player. There's the outputs. And he said, let's analyze the inputs behind the outputs. What is it that actually makes successful games? And let's analyze that with data. And this was a wild concept back in the early 2000s. People said to Billy Bean, like, you're crazy. You can't play baseball as a game of numbers. It's about a game of talent and personality. It's about grit. It's about passion, right? And Billy Bean's like, no, we're going to play a game based on numbers. And what they started doing weird things. Like, one of the things that they identified was that the on-base percentage was one of the leading indicators to win more baseball games. How much can you get on base based on how many at-bats you get, right? What's the on-base percentage? And they realized that, and they started like literally coaching their players how to get on base more. That's all they focused on in their coaching. Traditional coaching staffs at baseball would have coached their players how to hit the ball more, like how to increase your hit accuracy. Billy Bean and his data scientists, they said, if you get hit by the ball, there's 100% expected value that you're going to get on base. So they would literally coach their players every single day. Lean in with your face, lean in with your shoulder. You need to get hit by that ball, a few times per game so that we can get you on base more. And their games were ugly. Their games were long. Their games were very weird, and everybody hated them. They coached their players to foul more so that the pitchers would get tired over the course of the game, and they would increase the hit accuracy and the on-base accuracy. It was a weird game. They started doing things like that, like counterintuitive things based on data, right? And in 1 year that they implemented this process of using Moneyball, they went from like bottom of the league, they went to top of the league, from bottom of the league, top of the league. They won the regular season. They beat teams like the Yankees, like the Red Sox, 10 times their budget, right? And they went on to win the longest consecutive winning streak of baseball history with average players, no-name players that nobody wanted in their team. It was a revolutionary concept, so much so that literally the next season, the Boston Red Sox copied the exact same model, right? And they went on to win their first championship in like 86 years because they applied the concept of Moneyball. I'm Dominican. I like to think that it was Big Papi and Manny Ramirez, and the Platano Power did, but it wasn't. It was the power of data to play sports. And it was such a powerful concept that it transcended baseball. It went into football, right? Who would have said that Tom Brady, a lanky white guy who can't run very fast, was going to be one of the best football players of all time? Data-driven decisions that led him to even get picked in the draft, right? Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors, right? Data-driven teams. I mean, the Nuggets also follow the same concept of using data-driven metrics to understand how to play more games, how to play better games, how to win more games, right? Every major team of every major sport has a team of data scientists in the back end now, analyzing every single move of the game to try to understand how to win more games, right? And with Rilla, and actually with our partnership with Grosso University, we had a first ever opportunity to apply this concept of Moneyball for sales, right? So that we can analyze what's actually going on in these sales conversations that used to be a black box, right? And so what we did, just to be very succinct, we used our AI across many of our customers. We anonymized the data, right? We found, after analyzing 500,000 sales conversations, we found five specific things that top performing salespeople are doing in homes different than other average performers that are leading them to close $4-5 million a year in sales or more, that are leading them to have close rates upwards of 60 and 70% and NSLIs that you haven't even imagined, right? What is it that these top performers are doing differently? And we found 5 key topics, which I want to talk about here. So what we're going to be doing is I'm going to go topic by topic, and we have a world-class sales coach here with Dom, who's going to unpack, the reason and the whys behind all this data that I'm going to be sharing. So here we go. First topic that we found, after analyzing 500,000 sales conversations using AI, we found that the top performers who are at the top of their game, top 1% of performers, they talk consistently between 45 and 65% of the time compared to the homeowner versus the average reps who talk 75 to 85% of the time compared to the homeowner. This is really important. With Rillavoice, we actually measure when the rep is talking versus when the customer is talking. And one of the things we find is that the top performers talk 20% less on average than the average reps. 20% less makes a big impact. I want to stop there. Dom, why don't you unpack that for us? Why is talking less so incredibly important?
Yeah, so this is what kind of blew me away. Now, one statement I make commonly when I'm training salespeople is to be twice as good at sales, make twice as much money, be twice successful doesn't necessarily mean you have to drive twice as far or even being twice as good. A lot of times all it is being a little bit more proficient. And now we know the percentages, but being a little bit more proficient in all the critical areas of selling. And of course, one area is making the entire sales encounter a conversation and not an interrogation. Nobody's going to sit there and listen to a salesperson spit facts and figures and talk about how great they are for 2.5, 3 hours straight. So one thing that was trained to me early in my career is the average human being can tolerate 5 to 6 statements in a row before you lose about 50% of their attention span. And then when you keep going, and we've seen some crazy stuff on Rilla, where a sales rep has a 25, 30-minute monologue, meaning they're talking for 30 minutes straight without the customer saying one word. And then they're wondering why the customer is closing off their arms, they're rolling their eyes in the back of their head, and eventually kicking them the hell out of the house because they can't stand it anymore, right? So the big thing that we talk about in sales is selling is not telling. Telling is not selling. The person who is in charge of the conversation is not the one that's talking. The person that's in charge of the conversation is the one that's asking the questions and keeping the homeowner talking ideally. So the simple analogy that was taught to me, I always picture there's a voice activated spotlight above the kitchen table. Every time I'm talking, the voice activated spotlight spins around and shining on me. And every time it's shining on me, where's the prospect left? In the dark. So if I leave them in the dark too long, what's going to happen? I'm going to lose them. So what we're seeing is the top performers are really good at balancing out, keeping the spotlight shining on them and on themselves, ideally in an equal fashion. So then they don't allow the customer to sit in the dark too long and eventually lose them. Yeah. So another thing to understand, this is going to play to some of the other stats, but this kind of goes along with the whole thing being an equal dialogue conversation back and forth, is anything you say is an opinion. Anything you tell that prospect in the house is an opinion, and actually they tend to resist. However, when they say it, they own it. Now, to be an effective salesperson means I need to be an effective agent of influence. Well, in order to do that, I literally need to reprogram someone's own belief system. Because when you show up to the house, they have one thought in mind, one belief system. However, in order to win that deal, win that sale, I have to change that belief system. Whether it be price conditioning, whether it be get them to need, want, desire my product or service at the exclusion of everything else. Maybe when I first got there, they didn't think this project was necessarily a priority. So now I need to quickly put that project at the top of the priority list. The only way that's going to happen is if I keep the homeowner talking, keep the spotlight on them, and make this whole thing a back and forth conversation. And this is something that we've been preaching since the dawn of humanity. Ask questions, keep them talking, make this a two-way conversation back and forth. And now the data is proving it once and for all. And this is not something that's theory-based. And you can see this. Now, Rilla is a lot more proficient than someone even riding along just because of what it tracks. But when you're riding along with a salesperson in the house, you can see this thing happen. Or maybe in the beginning, the sales rep does a pretty good job of striking up a conversation. Then before you know it, they get into sales mode and the conversation stops. And then you can see that homeowner getting really uncomfortable, getting irritated. And then an hour into it, they're like, can we just cut to the chase and give me a price already? So that's a salesperson talking themselves out of the home. And that's the biggest challenge we're seeing with average salespeople, whereas top sales professionals are able to maintain the conversation throughout. And again, talk a lot less. So back to you, Sebastian.
Yeah. So, so this is exactly what, we're talking about, like talking less, like that's not a counterintuitive thing, right? But, it's such a powerful thing. Like we hear it all the time. You have 2 ears, you have one mouth. listen more than you speak, right? We hear it all the time, but it's actually correct. And you don't have to, it's just 20% less. Just try to put yourself under that 65% mark. If you actually start measuring how much you're talking, you're going to realize that's a problem that even I had. I was like going up to high 60s because I love talking and I love pitching. And I used to do stand up and I'm always monologuing. So you have to try to really consciously talk less. And so now that you know that that's really important, how do you try to talk less? Like, how do you coach your, like, what tricks do the top performers use to talk less than the average performers? And there's one very, very simple thing that you can do as a rep to try to lower your talk ratio. And we're going to go into that right now. The second topic that we analyzed is that the top performers of the entire country who are closing millions and millions and millions of dollars of sales every single year, they are asking 5 times the number of open-ended questions than the average performers, right? 5 times. So the average rep asks 5 open-ended questions during the course of a 2-hour meeting on average, right? 5, right? The top performers are asking 25 open-ended questions in the same course of the 2 hours, right? 25. So it's 5 times more. And this is one of the big reasons why they also have a lower talk ratio, because they're asking a lot of open-ended questions throughout the entire conversation, 5 times more. So Dom, please unpack that for us.
Yeah, and this piggybacks off what we were talking about earlier, selling's not telling. Now, I like that you bring up the topic of stand-up comedy, because one thing I admire about what comedians do is the level and the intensity of preparation for a 1-hour performance, right? So you told me this, I think 2 days ago. How long does it take to put together a 1-hour stand-up comedy performance?
A year of you doing like 6 shows a day, 7 days a week. A year.
Yeah. So 1 full year before the delivery and obviously the way a joke lands. I mean, I used to hear this about Jerry Seinfeld. He used to write a joke and then rehearse it and practice it and making sure the delivery of that joke was perfect for over a year. Now, obviously, we don't have to go that extreme, but one thing I see lacking in this industry is salespeople are not being deliberate in advance. We always say the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. Going through their entire sales process and deliberately inserting open and close-ended questions. I see ideally open-ended is the way to go, but close-ended is good too. Throughout the whole sales process to keep the homeowner talking. One exercise I used to do that I highly recommend all the people on this call, we got about 80 people. Try this on for size. Go through your company's story as a mastermind group. You get your whole sales team together and go through it slide by slide and go through it in the following manner. On this slide, what is a really powerful open-ended question we can ask to get the homeowner talking and to reveal some important information we would need to sell them? And when you do this as a mastermind group, you're going to be blown away when you have that creative engine going as an entire group. A lot of neurons are firing at that moment, right? You're going to be amazed at what types of open-ended questions you can come up with. And that's what you're going to see what top performers do consistently. And one thing you told me, Sebastian, is a lot of times your average salespeople will do a decent job early on in the discovery phase, asking some open-ended questions, but then you see it drop off like a cliff, right? It kind of drops off because what happens is when this salesperson's going through the survey or the needs assessment, of course, they're intentionally trying to gather information. Certainly at that point, they're going to be asking some open-ended questions because they're trying to get to know the roadmap to the sale. What are we doing? But the issue I see on ride-alongs and what Rilla is confirming in a very strong way, the moment the salesperson turns on, sales mode, for example, puts the sales hat on, the questions go out the window and now they just start talking at him for the next hour, hour and a half.
Yeah.
Whereas top performers, what we're noticing and what his data is demonstrating very clearly is in a linear fashion, top performers are asking open-ended questions throughout. Now, just to clarify, an open-ended question is an information-seeking question in which we do not know the answer to. And that's important because prospects are just like icebergs. Again, 80% of what I need to influence them is buried beneath the surface. And it's not like I'm going to walk into a house and the customer is just going to throw that up on the table and be like, here you go. Here's all the information you need to get my money, So in order to extract that information, I need to be very diligent about asking open-ended questions. And this is what I admire, again, going back to stand-up comedy. is the level of preparation in
Yeah.
advance they're willing to do in order to make sure that their jokes land the right way. They're getting the audience involved, making sure that the laughter is, of course, at the highest level. So salespeople need to do that same thing. They need to go through their whole stand-up comedy act, their whole performance. Because in a roundabout way, that's what we're doing. We're on stage. We're giving a performance. It's showtime.
Yep.
Prepare in advance those open-ended questions. It's gonna make your life a hell of a lot easier. Because just like stand-up comedy, they have you turn your cell phones off when you get there. That's because if you saw the stand-up comedy act online in advance before you got there, it wouldn't have the same level of impact. But these homeowners have never seen it before. So you're going to realize you're going to be able to ask the same types of open-ended questions with a lot of different groups of people, and you're going to have similar types of results, getting them to open up and share with you the information you need to be an agent of influence. But yeah, questions are the answers. So everyone write that down. Questions are the answers. All right, back to you, Sebastian.
So yeah, I want to stay on this topic for a little bit. So one of the things that you were mentioning, one of the things that we saw with the data is that the average reps will ask those 5 open-ended questions that they ask on average. They usually ask it at the beginning because they're trained to go through like a survey information gathering session with the customer. What made you bring us here today to your home? How long have you been living in this home? What seems to be the problem with your roof or with your current kitchen or with your windows, right? Open-ended questions that are, typical before you do an inspection, just to you get a sense of why you're there, right? Average reps do that very well, right?
Yes.
Top performers, like Dom said, right? And then the average reps go on and be like, okay, the problem with my roof is that it's leaking. Oh, I see it has some mold, blah, 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 blah. Okay, they do the inspection. They sit down at the kitchen table. They're like, let me tell you a little bit about my company. And then they go on. And then literally for like an hour, they're just talking. And then they show everything about their product demo. Like Dom talked about, it's like a guy with like 30 minutes monologue, which means that he talked nonstop for like 30 minutes. It was like, listen, my company was started back in 1865 by Abraham Lincoln, and we're here, and well, wait, there's more. Our windows, they're gonna make your house super cool, and they're gonna make it hot and warm and cold at the same time, and it just keep going and going and going. And the homeowner's like, oh my God, please, I just, what are you talking about? Top performers, when they start on their company presentation, on their product demo, right, or their, when they start with their presentation that they're sitting at the kitchen table, they still ask open-ended questions in those areas. They'll show a part of the demo. Let's say you're selling windows and you show the energy efficiency of the windows, right? The temperature control. See a reaction from the homeowner. Oh, wow. It seems like that resonated with you. What about that just resonated with you? Open-ended question. You have no idea. And you're stopping to see if the homeowner's actually engaging with what you're saying and not just going down a rabbit hole where the homeowner has they don't care what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah, and that's a really great sales strategy you just used there. It's called labeling, right? So seems like, looks like, feels like, sounds like. It's a really great way when you're looking at a customer. Sometimes you can tell in their facial expressions that they have some ideas going on in their mind. The wheels are turning. So use a label to try to pry out of them, get them to open up about what's on their mind. Because a lot of times there's some real, hidden gems, golden nuggets in there that you can extract, or maybe there's a hidden objection in there.
Yes, same thing.
And again, if you bypass that, if you bypass that opportunity to get them to open up about that, that can turn into a roadblock in the close.
And the same thing, if you see that the homeowner's not resonating with your demo, you stop and you say, hey, I'm sorry, where did I miss the mark? Seems like this is not really resonating with you. What can I help me here? What can I do to set us in the right direction? Open-ended question in the middle of the demo, right? And it sets you up in the right path.
So when I do sales training boot camp, Sebastian, I'll often take a topic, let's say insurance, for example, and I'll pick a volunteer from the audience. I'll say, who in the room is really good at selling the importance of having an insured contractor working on their home? And of course, I'll get this one guy, hey, I can do that. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So go ahead. I'm the prospect. You're the salesperson. Go ahead and sell me. And what I hear, this happens almost every time I do this, is a salesperson will go on a 5 to 10 minute rant about how important insurance is without asking you one question. I said, that was pretty good. A lot of good information, but let me go through the same thing. I want you to count how many questions I ask. And the last time I did this exercise, I asked about 25 open-ended and closed-ended questions, just talking about that one topic, insurance.
Right.
And how is it that I can do that? Years of preparation. I've been working on this relentlessly, like a freaking obsession, because that's about mastering the craft. Now, not that it has to take you that long, But as a mastermind group, you can expedite all this growth and development and building in these open-ended and closed-ended questions into the process to keep them talking. That's really the name of the game. Get them to say it, then they own it. Remember, when they
Yeah.
say it, they own it. So that's
Yeah.
why it's important.
And then the last thing I want to share here in the open-ended questions. So because, you know, top performers ask open-ended questions at the beginning of the presentation, they ask open-ended questions during the demo, and they also ask open-ended questions as it's almost like it's almost like their weapon of choice, you know, like asking open-ended questions at the end of the conversation when they're dealing with objections, right? It's like, price is too high. What about the price is high for you? What about the price doesn't work for you? The average reps, when they hear the price is too high, I mean, like, well, let me see what I can do for you. Let me give you a discount. Let me try to see what's going on here. You have no idea what that objection means. You have absolutely no idea what that objection means when the customer says the price is too high. I can't afford it. What do you mean you can't afford it? What does that mean? Help me here. I don't understand. What do you mean the price is too high? And then the homeowner says like, well, you know, I'm talking to another contractor. They came over last week and they said that they could do it for like, $5,000 cheaper. That's different than the price is too high, right? That's like, I'm looking at another estimate from another person that's, dealing with, the same product and it's giving it to me for cheaper. Okay, tell me a little bit more about that contractor. Where'd you find out about that contractor? What's the quotes? Help me understand here. And then they start talking and be like, okay, so that other contractor, they're not a reputable company. They're just like a friend of the family. I understand. Okay, got it. Now you know what you're dealing with, right? But it could be a million different things when somebody says the price is too high. Top performers do not go into overcoming objections. They use their weapon of choice. Ask an open-ended question. What do you mean by that? What the hell do you mean price is too high? Right? And then they can actually overcome the objection once they know what they actually do. So
excellent. Yeah. So again, that's one of the most simple and powerful and important sales strategies that you can possibly come up with is asking open-ended questions to keep the spotlight on them, make the whole thing a back and forth conversation, getting them saying things. And that's not easy to do. The whole profession of sales is really simple, but not easy. Because in order to pull this off, it takes preparation. You got to do this in advance. Again, talking about sports. Are these athletes only practicing in a live game? Of course not. They're sweating in peace, right? They're going through drills and rehearsals, getting that repetition and thousands of repetitions outside of the game. We got to be willing to do the same thing in sales.
So this is awesome. It is exactly right. And while we're on this topic, I want to introduce the next topic that we figured out about what is it that the top performers are doing differently than anybody else. So they ask a lot of open-ended questions. They keep the talk ratio low by doing this. And the other thing that they're able to do is they keep their talk speed consistent. In fact, when they go into the real selling, when they give the price and they start overcoming objections, this is a graph where this represents how many, how long into the conversation, 20%, 40% into the conversation, 60%, 80% into the conversation, 100% into the conversation. And this is the words per minute. So this is 50 words per minute, 100 words per minute, 150, 200 words per minute. And this graph, the green one represents the top performers and the yellow one represents the average reps. So top performers, throughout the entire conversation, they keep their talk speed consistent and they actually slow down a little bit when they're overcoming objections. Average performers, their natural instinct is to speed up. They speed up when they're overcoming objections. Their talk speed actually starts quite around the same, right? Everything's fine. We're just figuring out some things. We're just asking questions. You're just building rapport. And then what happens? I'm an average rep. I'm not prepared. Oh my God, the price is too high. It's not. I have a discount. Oh my God, what can I do for you? No, but you got to understand, our company's amazing. And then the homeowner's like, I don't trust this person, right? Top performer. Price is too high. What do you mean by the price is too high? Keep the same. They slow down. Their heart rate doesn't speed up because they're professionals. They know they don't get phased by that. Their heart rate doesn't increase. They don't start talking faster. They keep the same pace and they slow it down. It's like, help me understand here. I don't get it. You said that it was really important to you to work with a really reputable company. And now you're telling me you're getting a quote from Jimmy, Billy, Bob, Joel from around the corner because your cousin told you about it and he's going to come in and do some job for like $2,000. Do you really trust somebody that's going to cost you $2,000 to fix your kitchen or your home? Really? Tell me about that. Homeowner starts talking. They keep it slow. They keep it steady, right? And again, because they ask open-ended questions, and this is a really good tool, keeping your talk speed low and keeping your patience high, especially when you're overcoming objections. If you're one of these average reps whose natural instinct is to speed up, consciously think when the objection comes, The price is too high. I need to think about it. Consciously in your head, think, let me pause. Let me pause. Now, literally slow down, like consciously. Let the objection simmer. Wait. Be like, what do you mean by that? And let the customer respond. And then you're going to feel like the customer, you're going to see how the customer then doesn't start getting defensive when you get defensive. And then now you're not even overcoming an objection. You're back to discovery. You're just back to helping the customer figure out their problem. And then they trust you, right? So slowing down, super critical when you're overcoming objections.
So this information, it made me smile because I have a lot of firsthand experience with this with myself personally in sales encounters, but also managing salespeople throughout my career. One thing that we talk about in sales is simply a transference of feeling and emotion, right? And ideally, you as a thermostat, not the thermometer, you should be the thermostat in the house. You control and regulate the environment. You control the emotion of the sales encounter, not the prospect, right? The most important thing we need to be doing in sales is controlling our disruptive emotions. They say he or she who is in more control of their disruptive emotions will have the highest probability of getting the outcome they desire. And we can see that now with the data. Now, I had a salesperson one time. This is a $3 million producer. Had a bad stretch in his sales. It was like a 1 week stretch where he couldn't close the door with the wind behind him. It happens to the best of us. And he called me all frustrated and flustered. It's like, Dominic, I don't know what the hell's going on. I can't close anything. I'm getting really pissed off. I'm freaking out. Help me here. I said, well, I can tell just by the way you're talking, probably what the problem is. Okay. So let me ask you a question. When the customer objects to you in the last few days, what are you thinking in that little mind of yours? What are you feeling deep down inside? Are you feeling pissed? Are you feeling upset? He's like, yeah, I'm pissed. I'm like, is your heart rate increasing? He's like, yeah. I'm like, they've done studies that show that the customer's heart rate will actually mimic yours. So even though you're trying to say all the right things, if deep down you're pissed off and your heart rate's increasing, what is the homeowner going to start to feel? They're going to start to feel anxious. They're both going to start to feel uncomfortable. What's very interesting about sales, especially at the negotiating table in the close, is both you and the prospect are tiptoeing on the edge of fight or flight. It's very easy to kick that prospect into fight or flight. And when you do that, the conversation's over. Also, it's very easy for you personally to get kicked into fight or flight. A lot of times that happens simply by the customer telling you no. All of a sudden, your fight or flight response comes in. Yeah. You get all pissed. You get brain fog because that's what happens when your fight or flight response gets activated, right? So now, one of the first elements of objection handling that we hammer into salespeople, step one is listen. And this is why I'm really happy that all the data is showing that the top salespeople are the best listeners. And by the way, listening is not a passive sales strategy. As a matter of fact, to truly listen to somebody, it's one of the most difficult and active things you can possibly do. It's exhausting. Now, why is that? While I'm talking right now, I guarantee that Sebastian and Nick and everybody watching probably has another monologue going on in their head right now, talking while I'm talking, thinking about things, talking. So when you're at the kitchen table and you have John and Mary Smith and you're talking, it's not 3 people having a conversation. It's actually 6 people. Because I'm talking, while I'm talking, I got a robot in my head. When they're listening to me, they got a robot in their head telling them all this stuff. So it's all this noise going on. No one's truly listening to anybody. So how do you truly listen to somebody? And this is why this takes, you got to practice this in your everyday life. When you're talking to anyone from now on, you got to try to work on shutting off that voice in your head. Get laser focus on the individual that's trying to communicate with you and focus all of your energy. It's really hard. It sounds simple, but it's really hard to only listen to what they are saying. And this is actually one in FBI negotiators, one of the biggest things that they have to practice and drill into them. If they're talking to somebody on the phone, they got to shut off all the distractions, all the background noise, the robot in their head, and truly listen to the person on the phone. And they got to try to pinpoint tonality, voice inflection, background noises, all this stuff going on. And they can't do that effectively if they have this monologue going on. But a 5 to 10 second moment of silence when the customer objects to you. And there's several reasons for this. I could do a 3-hour conversation just on this alone. But you have to understand that when the customer first blurts out an objection, more often than not, that's a reflex response. It's a reflex response, meaning that it's not the real reason they're not doing it. That's not the emotional root origin of what's holding them back. Now, how effective it is to try to overcome an objection if it's the wrong objection? It's not. So if I jump down their throat and machine gun close them like Rambo, close after close after close, and I don't have proper pacing and patience in the close, I'm never going to be able to get to the emotional root origin of what's holding them back. So a lot of times after that 5 to 10 seconds, you just having that increased moment of patience, just because the silence is uncomfortable, because 5 to 10 seconds feels like 5 to 10 years in the house. The customer will start talking more to fill in the silence. This is why, in order to be good at sales, we got to work on developing obstacle immunity and get comfortable with the uncomfortableness.
Yep.
This is what the top performers have conditioned themselves to do. That when other salespeople are freaking out, allowing this high tense, high stress situation, bog their judgment, and because they're uncomfortable, the salesperson is trying to fill in the silence by talking uncontrollably.
Yeah.
You got to do the exact opposite. Slow down. I love that you said slow down. I'm talking to companies all over the country right now, and the biggest problem is not just in the close. The whole sales process is way too freaking fast.
Yeah.
I just looked at a company recently where the average timeline in the house was an hour. I'm sorry, I don't care what you're selling. I don't care if you're selling a welcome mat for the front door or a $90,000 metal roof. You need to slow down, because in order to effectively influence a decision, I need to build a relationship, build a foundation of trust. I need to, of course, build the right amount of value in myself, my company, my product, my service. You can't do that in an hour. It's impossible. And if you're lucky enough to do that, guess what's going to happen? That lead's going to cancel anyway.
Yeah.
So this is what I really love about what the data is showing is really good salespeople are like well-trained chess players. At the negotiating table, they're always 4 or 5 moves ahead, which means that when they, close number 1 or first step in the close, the customer objects, great. Step 2, I'm going on to my next move. Nothing's a big deal. They can control their disruptive emotions. They don't talk too fast. They increase their patience, right? So again, that's how you can't close somebody unless they're comfortable and relaxed. In order to do that, you yourself have to be comfortable and relaxed and be patient, settle down, slow down, listen, especially at the negotiating table.
So we talked about 3 key things of how the top performers, can talk and change their kind of like more soft selling skills, ask open-ended questions so you can talk less, so you can keep your heart rate low and you can keep your talk speed low, especially when you're overcoming objections, right? Now what I want to show you guys for the last 2 topics, I want to talk about what is it that the top performers are talking about in these black boxes that we previously considered as in-home conversations. We shine some light and we actually use natural language to understand what is it that's being talked about in these conversations. And there's 3 key topics that we found that are across industries are being used so much by top performers from across industries more than anybody else. The 3 key topics that we found that they're talking about more than anyone is financial terms, number 1. Number 2 is company story. And number 3 is qualification, a qualification sequence, qualify their customer. Financial terms refers to, topics like not only financing is included in this umbrella term, but topics like how are you going to pay for this, right? How am I going to pay for this, right? Is it cash up front? Is it half and half? What's the impact going to be to my bank account? Is there financing offered, right? What's the level of financing? What's the interest rate like, right? What's that going to do versus an investment that I could make in another area, right? Why is that important for me for my finances, right? Financial terms of the contract, of the project, super important. The top performers talk about this topic almost 8 times more on average than average performers, 8 times more almost. And so these are the 3 key topics. I want to stop there. Dom, please unpack that for us. Why is it that the top performers are talking about financial terms 8 times more on average than the average performers?
So it's interesting. A few months ago, actually, it was probably about a year ago, I had the privilege of being a guest speaker at a Goldman Sachs event. Because again, when they acquired Green Sky Finance, they threw this big kind of welcome seminar, and they invited a lot of people there. And my topic was how to leverage financing to grow and scale your home improvement business. Okay. Because I firmly believe one of the most important skill sets of a salesperson is being able to leverage financing as the boomerang to the sale. And I was just talking to Sebastian and Nick before we got on the recording here today. I did a boot camp last week in Boston. I'm not going to name the company, but there was a salesperson there who's been in the industry for 4 months. And before coming into the industry, he was a finance manager at a car dealership. And he'd been doing that for 20 years. So for 20 years, this person's been talking money with people and learning how to negotiate and make people feel comfortable when it talks about financial terms, interest rates, and educating them on what the best finance solution is for them. There's one thing I always train my salespeople on is when price is on the table and you're going through financial terms, you literally need to put your finance advisor hat on, because there's a certain way you need to talk, act, and behave. And there's a certain level of knowledge required in you as an agent of influence in order to make people feel comfortable talking about money. This is a very personal subject, okay? And this sales professional that I'm talking about, in his 4th month, 1 month selling siding and roofing. Now think of all you companies on this call that offer siding and roofing, sold $1.6 million in business in 1 month, in the month of May. Now, what was his number one skill set? Being able to leverage financing is the boomerang to the sale. 95% of that sales rep's business is sold on financing, period, end of story. And he'll tell you flat out, everybody finances for me, even cash buyers. And what he's good at is in financial terms. Now, if your salesperson is bringing up financing for the first time in the close, they're doing it wrong. Financing is something that needs to be talked about throughout the sales encounter. And obviously, by the time I get to the close, this homeowner already understands and is already conditioned that financing is the way that everybody buys. You know, there's a sales strategy, guys, that we train on called seeding and layering. And seeding and layering is simply when I plant a thought in a prospect's mind, then through constant reinforcement, I allow that thought to nurture and grow into belief. So the reality of the industry is less than 2% of contractors offer financing. So what that means is a vast majority of the homeowners in this country are not conditioned that to buy windows or roofing or siding, the normal way to do it is through financing. They think it's a cash and carry endeavor, right? They have to come up with the money or the funds on their own. So which means that when I'm in the house, I personally need to seed and layer and condition that homeowner, plant those thoughts early, reinforce them throughout the sales encounter. So that by the time I'm at the negotiating table talking about money, they're already conditioned that that's the way everybody buys. That's normal. And this is really empowering because when you're really good at this whole concept of financial terms, you no longer have to concern yourself with price. You no longer have to talk about price. Price doesn't even matter anymore. When you're talking financing, all you're focused on is affordability now. Affordability. What's the difference between price and affordability? Does anyone have one of these guys here? A smartphone? Raise your hand if you have a smartphone.
Yeah.
Let's say you went down to the local cell phone store and they had the new iPhone 14 for sale, and you could take that new phone home for the everyday low price of $24,000. They had a $24,000 price tag on the phone. How many of you would own that phone right now? Maybe a couple of you, a couple of you more well-off individuals that maybe have your own private jet. But you wouldn't see homeless people on the side of the street playing Angry Birds on their cell phone. I can guarantee it. Why is it that everybody has a cell phone? The reason why is because, what is it? $200 a month. $200 a month. Well, what is that over 10 years? $24,000, okay? It's ridiculous. And that's one of the most ridiculous investments. That shit breaks every year. You get your new phone, you get it home, you throw it in the toilet, the first thing you do, right? So the whole point is financial terms is proven to be one of the most powerful skill sets, especially now. What's happening to homeowners' disposable income? If you're not making $52,000 a year or more right now, you're in poverty level income. So people don't have the money. They say the average household, over 50% of the America or more, has less than $500 that they could spend unexpected right now. Guess what percentage of people finance cars, even luxury brands? Over 85% of all cars that are purchased, even like Mercedes and BMW, Porsche, Lamborghinis, are financed. So financial terms, knowing how they're going to buy, being comfortable, knowing how to talk, act, and behave in that situation is one huge element. It has to be weaved into your training, because if the salesperson is timid or they get uncomfortable having this conversation, guess what? It's over. You're never going to be able to close, period. Okay.
And that's so cool that you talked about that, you know, that guy who was in the car dealership business, because that's really, and because we work with some car dealerships as well. And that's like something that's like almost like literally like second nature to anybody who's like a salesperson. That's like part of their sales process. So you go to the car dealership, talk to the sales rep, let me bring my manager to talk about financing.
Those are the closers.
Yeah, exactly. They bring
So
the real
at the end of
closers.
the day, if you're looking for a good salesperson to recruit into this business that's not in this business, go to the finance department of your local car dealerships and poach the shit out of those people. Those are
Literally.
going to be absolute studs, because if they can learn the sales process, gain the product knowledge, they already know how to have that conversation, talk, act, and behave about money, which is
And
huge.
it's so important, because when the homeowner is thinking about price and they say like the price is too high, when you really get into the financial terms, it's like, okay, how am I going to pay for this? What, because that's really what's going to impact their actual life, right? And if you can really go into that uncomfortable conversation, talk about their income, talk about how they're going to pay for this, that's really like, because you could get a deal signed, cancellations, right? Oh, the price is okay. And then the homeowner realizes, because you didn't do a good job at helping them understand how this was going to affect it, then you're going to have problems later on. You're going to have cancellations, right? Because they didn't know it was going to cost them that much up front, you know? You want to walk the homeowner through this, right? Because that's really what they're worried about. How much is this actually going to, how is this going to impact my bank account? And so financial terms, really important. And then the last thing that I want to talk about here with you all today. So these topics, one of the things that we can do with Rilla is we can see what people are talking about, what topics they're using. We can also see when are they utilizing these topics, when in the conversation, right? And this is the most counterintuitive thing that we found. Just like the Moneyball people figured out that, you need to get on base, you need to get hit by the ball and smack the ball in the face. You can increase your on base percentage. You can increase your winning rate in games. We figured out, right, that with the data, that top performers, the average time that they're mentioning the company story, the average time, right? So this is counting all the mentions of company story. The average is that they're mentioning company story about an hour and 45 minutes into the conversation, after they've talked about financial terms. Average reps, and this is interesting because we usually, all of our sales training, all of our presentations, you usually are trained to talk about company story at the beginning, right? You do your inspection, you do your qualifying sequence, you sit down at the kitchen table. The first thing you do is you tell the homeowner a little bit about your company. And you go on and you say, like, we've been in business for 25 years. We're AAA rated by the Better Business Bureau. We are a like hometown family business. You're going to get one of our reps in the phone, not just some offshore, one of these big brands. You're going to use whatever arsenal you have in your company story to explain it there. That's what the average reps do. They do their company story at the beginning. And then they talk about financial terms, if they do at all, about halfway through the conversation. Top performers, they do their presentation, they do the whole thing. They talk to the homeowner about the dangers of the contracting business. You need to be careful. They do the product demo. They talk about price. They talk about financing terms. And then they talk about the company story right at the end of the conversation when they're struggling with objections. That is super counterintuitive. So Dom, why don't you help us unpack what the hell is going on here? Because every sales training that I've seen, every presentation puts company story right at the beginning, but the data is showing us something different. What the hell is happening there?
So now, just full disclosure, even though the data shows one thing, you got to also understand that there's a reason why top performers are reinforcing and talking about the company after price is already on the table. This reminds me of a very famous individual, Norman Vincent Peale. Anyone familiar with this guy? So one thing that Norman Vincent Peale was famous for was giving some of the most phenomenal speeches of anyone at the time in the world. This guy could hold an audience like nobody's business. And he had a simple formula and a simple method. And his formula was, first, I'm going to tell him what I'm going to tell him. Then I'm going to tell him. And then I'm going to tell him what I just told him.
Yeah.
Now, the mistake I think we often make in sales is we think that we can bring up a topic one time. And the customer is going to absorb that information. They're going to process it and retain it. Now, the reality is of human nature is our short-term memory is almost non-existent. We retain information in a short-term fashion, like Dory from the movie Finding Nemo. Okay. So it's in one ear, out the other. So we talk about the 3 R's in sales: repeat, review, remind. Repeat, review, remind. So now when I look at this data, what I would tell a salesperson knowing this is, of course, I don't see anything wrong with talking about your company early in the sales encounter, but those reps that are just talking about the company one time and then never bringing it up ever again are reinforcing those things and repeat, review, remind. And in the event they're getting an objection, they're not reinforcing all the things the customer fell in love with about the company. The homeowner is trying to make a buying decision with very little of the information. So one thing that's important is before we deliver a price, even that we do a feature and benefits overview. And the reason why we do that is because we want to rebuild the value in our installation package, our company, our products and services. But then occasionally, once price is on the table and we're getting these objections, this is an old Zig Ziglar quote. A lot of times they're telling you no because they do not know enough to give you a yes. Now, what the top performers are doing is when they're getting those objections after financial terms, they're not afraid to go back in. And sometimes for me, it was going back through a part of the product presentation. Sometimes going back through the company story, reinforcing the things about our company they already committed to or that they really appreciate, that they really love. But the average person needs to hear things 6 to 18 times before they can retain it. So let me repeat that because I only said it one time. The average person needs to hear something 6 to 18 times to retain it. So if you have it in your step selling sales system that you're talking about your company early on, I don't see anything wrong with that. And that's obviously the way we train it. But what this data is telling us is the sales rep has to be prepared to go back through that company story again and reinforce all the commitments that that prospect gave them earlier on. So the homeowner has a lot more of that information to make an informed decision. And I've even had it, Sebastian, where I had to literally get my kit back out after the price is on the table and go back through. And I would do it this way. I say, I apologize, John and Mary. I must not have gone through my kit very well. Let me just explain some of the highlights here, just so we can recall what we talked about earlier. And we kind of go back through a little mini presentation, reinforce the things about our company. That way I'm getting them back up to a much higher retention of information so they can appreciate the value of the investment a lot stronger. So that's how I would translate the data.
That's awesome.
What I wouldn't condone here is looking at this data and skipping your company's story and only talking about your company in a reactive fashion after price is on the table. That's what I would not condone to anybody here. But what this does show is you have to be willing, in a lot of cases, to rebuild the value and reinforce the selling points of yourself, your company, your product, your service after price is on the table. That way the homeowner can, again, see the big picture value that you work so hard to build throughout the process.
1000%.
That makes sense for everybody.
Yeah. So I just want to add a little bit more before wrapping up here. So this final point, company story. So to recap, right? We talked about, right? We just recap. This is talking about reminding, right? So we talked about 5 key topics that you can use in your sales teams today to kind of improve your selling, right? The first is you talk less. You try to keep your talk ratio down throughout the entire conversation. Make it a two-way conversation between yourself and the customer. Keep yourself between 45 and 65% of the time. You talk less by asking more open-ended questions. Just practice asking more open-ended questions throughout the entire conversation at the beginning, middle of the presentation, and the end when you're overcoming objections, especially when you're overcoming objections, so that you can keep your talk speed consistent and even a little bit slower, and don't speed up. That's a natural human reaction, is to speed up. Ask open-ended questions to keep yourself steady, keep your heart rate low, keep it a conversation, two-way conversation. Don't engage in fight or flight. Don't let the homeowner go into fight or flight. Keep it low, right? Ask open-ended questions throughout the end, throughout the entire presentation, especially when you're overcoming objections. And when you're overcoming objections, right? One of the best things is you're going to be able to talk about financing terms, right? You're overcoming objections. Once you get to the nitty gritty and throughout the entire presentation, talk about financing terms, talk about your company story, talk about qualifying your customer. And then lastly, your company story. Once the homeowner tells you, play this scenario, price is too high, you slow down, you wait, you said, help me understand. What about the price is too high for you? And the homeowner says, I'm looking at another estimate that's like 10 times cheaper. Help me understand. What do you mean by this other estimate? What kind of estimate are you looking? What kind of contractor are you looking? Oh my God, I'm working with a local contractor. I see. So you're working with a family friend you've never done business with. I understand. Got it. So then we are having a misalignment here of the price versus the value. Can I tell you a little bit more about our company right now to see why you're paying the premium? And that's when they bring it on. They bring their best bullet to deal with the objection when it matters the most. And so there's many more things. There's many more things that you can analyze with this data. This is just general best practices that we found after analyzing 500,000 sales conversations in partnership with Grosso University here. If you do want to understand how to apply this to your own business and make sure that you can get your own best practices and implement your own Moneyball for sales, just like the Denver Nuggets, just like the Golden State Warriors, just like every major team of every major sport, you can go to rillavoice.com. you can go to grossouniversity.com and you can sign up here to book a demo, and we'd be happy to help you out and figure out how you can implement Moneyball for sales. So,
So do you mind if I talk about the case study here, Sebastian?
absolutely, go ahead.
All right. So everyone's like, okay, what are the numbers? Like if I were to execute, the right system paired with the right technology, what type of results? Because the results are what matter, right? So we actually have a really great case study that just happened with our sales academy, of course, with Rilla. So the combination of the right sales system with the right technology. And this is a rebap dealer out of San Antonio, Texas. Okay. And what they did is they had 13 salespeople when they first came to us, but 6 of them were veterans and they didn't want to stir the beehive too much. So what they did is they gave us 5 of the new salespeople that they had on their team. And they put them through our sales academy. And of course, we started actively putting them on Rilla, giving them coaching, post-training, molding, and support, and fine-tuning their skills using data. And last month, the 5 reps that went through our sales academy ran 75 leads. And the 6 reps that didn't go through ran 114 leads. So we have 75 leads, the new guys that went through our training, versus 114 leads, the reps that did not go through the training. So it's a pretty good indication, right? They wanted to see, okay, let's see what the results really are. The reps that did not go through the training had a demo rate of 79%. They wrote 27 deals, 22 net sales for a total volume of 392,000. So that was the non-sales academy, non-Rilla case study, the control group or whatever you want to call it. The Grosso trained reps on the Rilla platform, leveraging data, treating sales like a coach, they ran 75 leads. They demoed 72. So their demo rate was 96%. So just that alone was almost a 20% improvement. They wrote 31 sales and had 27 net, which means their retention was off the charts. They're demoing much higher. The retention is much higher. They sold 507,000. So about $120,000 more net sales on way less leads. And the slugging average was 6,767 versus the non-trained, non-Rilla reps, which is 3,400. So guess what this company's doing with the rest of their sales team now? They're getting them through the sales academy. They're getting them on Rilla. And it is what it is. When you have this data, it's almost like cheating. And I don't want to say it because it still requires work, but it literally is almost like cheating reality, because you're able to make sure that all of your coaching now and forever is not done in a reactive fashion, trying to sort through all the BS excuses. Because most times when I'm a coach, after the sales rep has a pitch and miss, I have to kind of sort through all their excuses and all the things they're making up as to why they didn't sell it, and then try to coach through that. Whereas with Rilla, I can actually look at exactly what's truly happening, full visibility. And I love it because it's a third party, unbiased. It's not me just making stuff up. The data is what it is. I can maintain the relationship with that rep, make sure my coaching is way more directly targeted to what's truly going on. And together, it's such an amazing growth opportunity for the trainer and for the salesperson. And it's almost addicting, right? So let's fine tune. Let's focus on this one area of asking more questions. So we start working on that, and then we compare last week with this week. We see, okay, looks like there's a 10% increase in the talk ratio. So you went from 75% to 65%. So you're well on your way to what the top performers are doing. And treating sales like that, I mean, it's an absolute gift. And it's a gift for us at Grosso University, to be honest with you. And I mean it when I say it. It wouldn't be possible for us to do what we do here without this type of technology. So again, thank you, Sebastian, for all that. It's absolutely incredible. And the thing I'm highly impressed with, you guys are continually adapting and evolving this technology, again, as time goes on, to be even more profound, give us more information. So again, you as the sales leaders, sales trainers, and owners watching this, I can tell you firsthand experience that with the right system, the right technology, I mean, it's literally unlimited. Even in today's climate, when conversion rates are down, people are struggling. There's reps right now selling 1.6 million a month. How many of those would you need on your team in order to have an all-star sales team of sales warriors? That's all it takes.
Yeah, man, we're really glad to partner with you guys. Again, if you guys want to learn more about Rilla or Grosso, just go to grossouniversity.com or go to rillavoice.com. That's RILLA voice.com. and book a demo. And if you're thinking about, implementing sales training, if you don't have a sales trainer yourself, sign up for a demo for Rilla, and we'll show you how we can help you get set up with the Rillavoice and Grosso University partnership. So thank you all
Awesome.
for coming
Got
today.
some questions there, Nick? Is there questions?
Most of them have been answered. The one that you can answer quick is with that last story you shared. Did the seasoned reps get trained with a different system?
So they had a system prior to us coming there. It was their own step selling system. So essentially what they're going to have to do is, the way I like to explain it is, all the things that you know are working for you in the house, keep doing that stuff. But what we try to do is we try to reimagine that stuff for our step selling sales methodology, because what you'll find is the flow of the Grosso sales system is going to be very similar to a lot of things. There's just a couple nuances and areas of focus and golden nuggets that we add to what they're already doing to obviously turn them into sales superstars. But again, it's not uncommon where they have their own sales methodology before we get there. And then when we come there, we just kind of take that system to the next level. But yeah, they were technically on a different step selling process when we started working with them. Whereas the new guys that were green, this is why I love working with green reps. The new people that were green, it was kind of like a clean slate, blank canvas. We were able to truly mold them into sales superstars.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you for that's kind of it for questions. Most of them were coming through and were able to be answered. Yeah, thanks for attending today, everyone that attended. We will be sending out a recording. I got that question a lot. Some people joined a little bit later. So that'll be sent out either later this week, probably early next week. And yeah, if you have more information or want to learn more information with Rilla or Grosso, we'll include that information in the follow-up email as well, just to make it simple for you guys. And from there, yeah, thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Dominic. I appreciate it. Glad to be a part of this. And yeah, thank you all for coming.
Thanks, everybody. Have a fantastic
Thank you
day.
all. Thank you, Dom. Thank you, Nick. Have fun
Thanks,
with your party. Bye.